Hello, amazing people, and a huge, warm welcome to today's video. It is an absolute joy to have you here. Before we dive into this truly fascinating and surprising topic, I want to take a genuine moment to send my very best wishes to you and your loved ones. Wherever you are in the world, I truly hope you are feeling strong, healthy, and full of positive energy. Now, let's explore one of the most bizarre and incredible stories in the world of food. A story that involves a fruit, a nut, and a dangerous secret because the way cashews grow is unlike anything else you've ever seen. And it explains why they are often so expensive. If I were to ask you to imagine how nuts grow, you might picture them like acorns hanging from a branch, or maybe like peanuts, which actually grow underground. But cashews play by a completely different set of rules. The first time you see a cashew tree, it looks wrong. It looks like the tree is growing its fruit backwards. Because the truth is, the cashew nut that we all know and love is not actually the fruit of the tree. Instead, it's the seed. And it grows hanging off the bottom of a completely separate fruit called a cashew apple. This is the part that blows people's minds. The tree produces a large, beautiful, and juicy fruit that is red, yellow, or sometimes a mix of both, and it looks a bit like a pear or a bell pepper. This is the cashew apple, and it's actually delicious and edible, but it's incredibly fragile, which is why you've probably never seen one in a regular supermarket. And then, dangling from the bottom of this fruit, is the cashew nut itself, in its raw form, encased in a hard shell. It looks like a small, gray, kidney-shaped boxing glove hanging from the fruit. This whole structure, the juicy apple with the nut attached to its bottom, is one of the most peculiar and fascinating things in nature. It's a two-for-one deal from a single tree, but getting to the edible part we recognize involves a dangerous and difficult process that has fascinated and challenged people for centuries. Let's talk about that cashew apple first, because it's the part that often gets completely overlooked. In countries where cashews are grown, like India, Brazil, Vietnam, and parts of Africa, the cashew apple is a prized treat. It's not a true apple, of course. It's what's known as a false fruit or an accessory fruit. The real fruit of the tree is actually the nut itself, and the juicy apple part develops from the stem of the flower. The cashew apple is incredibly juicy, sweet, and has a unique flavor that's a bit tropical, a bit like mango, and a little astringent. It's packed with vitamin C, even more than an orange, and it's used to make all sorts of wonderful things. You can drink its juice, which is very popular and refreshing. You can make it into jams, jellies, and even ferment it into alcoholic drinks like the famous Feni in Goa, India, which is a potent liquor. The problem with the cashew apple is that it's extremely delicate and perishable. It bruises incredibly easily and begins to ferment almost immediately after it's picked. This makes it nearly impossible to ship around the world. It has to be consumed or processed very quickly, right near where it's grown. This is the tragic reason why most of us outside of the growing regions never get to taste this amazing fruit. Its short shelf life means it's a local delight, a hidden secret of the tropics. Now, let's get to the nut itself, and this is where the story takes a dangerous turn. That gray, kidney-shaped nut that hangs from the apple is not what we buy in a can. That is the raw cashew seed, and it is surrounded by not one, but two shells. The outer shell is smooth and thin, but between that outer shell and the inner shell where the edible nut is, there is a toxic, caustic liquid. This liquid is filled with a chemical compound called urushiol. If that name sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same toxic substance that is found in poison ivy and poison oak. This is nature's powerful defense mechanism to protect the valuable seed inside from insects and animals. Contact with this liquid can cause severe chemical burns on the skin, similar to a really bad poison ivy rash. If the fumes are inhaled during processing, they can cause serious respiratory problems. This is the huge, dangerous secret of the cashew. They cannot simply be picked and cracked open like a walnut or a pecan. The process of making a cashew safe to eat is long, difficult, and almost always done by hand, which is a major reason why cashews are one of the more expensive nuts on the market. So, how do we get from this toxic seed to the delicious, creamy nut in our trail mix? The process is fascinating and requires immense care. First, the cashew apples with the nuts attached are carefully harvested from the tree. The apple is often separated and used locally, while the nuts are collected for processing. The raw nuts are then typically dried in the sun for a few days, which helps to reduce the moisture content and makes the toxic liquid a little less volatile. But drying alone isn't enough to make them safe. The next step is the most critical and dangerous: roasting. The nuts are roasted at a very high temperature, often in large, rotating drums. This roasting process is what actually neutralizes the dangerous urushiol. The heat causes the toxic oil to burn off and evaporate. However, this must be done very carefully, usually in an open area, because the fumes can be harmful to the workers. In some traditional methods, the nuts are roasted in a shallow pan over an open fire, and the liquid that seeps out is actually collected. This liquid, despite being toxic, has its uses. It's called cashew nut shell liquid, and it's used in industry to make things like lubricants, paints, and even insecticides. After roasting, the nuts are cooled down. Now they are safe to touch, but they are still inside their incredibly hard inner shell. The next step is cracking. The shells are so hard that they can't be cracked by a standard nutcracker. They have to be cracked open by hand by skilled workers, often using a small hammer or a simple tool. This is a painstaking process. The workers have to be careful not to shatter the nut inside or leave behind any small pieces of the inner shell, which can still have traces of the toxic oil. Finally, the thin, papery skin around the nut, called the testa, is removed, often by hand, to reveal the familiar creamy white cashew nut we know. They are then sorted, graded, and often lightly roasted again or steamed to ensure they are completely safe and to bring out their flavor before being packaged and sent around the world. When you understand this entire journey, the price of cashews starts to make perfect sense. You are paying for an incredibly labor-intensive and dangerous process that, even today, is very difficult to fully automate because of the irregular shapes of the nuts. You are paying for the skill of the workers who carefully process them. And you are paying for a truly unique product of nature. The next time you eat a cashew, take a moment to appreciate its wild story. Think about the beautiful, juicy apple that gave its life so the nut could grow. Think about the dangerous, toxic secret it held inside its shell. And think about the many hands that carefully, and at some risk, transformed it from a hazardous seed into a delicious and nutritious snack. It's a journey from a tropical tree to your table that is filled with wonder, danger, and human ingenuity. It's a reminder that some of the most wonderful things in nature often come with the best defenses, and that the food we eat often has a hidden story that is far more complex and interesting than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey to discover the secret life of the cashew. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.